Hello, my name is Lachlan,
Hi, I'm Grace.
and we're going to show you how to build and use a force measurer. So Grace, do you want to show us how do we build a force measurer?
Sure, so in your kit you should have a ruler with a string tied to it, a series of rubber bands, and some paper clips. Now, you're going to take your paper clips and you're going to bend them in two different ways. We'll show you this on the screen. So you have a paper clip with a loop on the side, and you have a paper clip with a straight line coming out of the side. Now, how you're going to be connecting these together is you're going to be wrapping the rubber bands in a chain. So how to do that is you thread one rubber band into another and then push it through itself and pull so you have a loop.
Okay, so Grace is going to show that to us just one more time.
So after you've got your first two springs on, so your paper clip with the straight line sticking out is then added in exactly the same method. So you thread your rubber band through and loop it around so that you've added your gauge to your chain. So we can continue threading the rest of our coloured rubber bands onto the chain.
Don't worry if you find this a bit tricky. For year 4, we can understand it's a bit difficult, but as long as you find a way to get those rubber bands to stay together, it'll work.
Now you need to attach this to your ruler. So this can be done in the same way as before. Now there's a hole in the top of your ruler, so if you thread your top rubber band through the hole and then loop the rest of your chain through, you have to pull it all the way through, tie that tight, then your top rubber band is tied to the top of the ruler. You then have your rubber bands that can spread down the length of the ruler. Now, to keep this straight in line, we're going to use our other paper clip. So this one has the hole. Now we're going to thread the larger hole onto the ruler, and we'll just use a piece of tape on the back to keep that in place. Now we can take the end of our rubber band chain and feed that through the loop. This keeps our chain nice and straight. Finally, we need to put our cup to hold our weights on the end of our chain.
We're using a cup held up by paper clips and string.
So we can use the clip of the rubber band to attach to the chain. The easiest way to do this is actually to have it separate first. Again, looping the paper clip over so it's a loop, and then tying that to, just using the fold in the paper clip to tie that onto our mass. Then you can see you've got your force measurer.
Alright, now that we have our force measurer, we got to help our students learn to use it. So in this case, at the moment, we have got the cup is empty. And if I have a look at the little line here on my paperclip, it says 301 millimeters. So I'm going to write that down, that when there's no mass at all, so I'm just writing on my paper, mass is 0, then the ruler is reading 301.
Or 9 if you want to count up.
So I'm reading from the bottom part here. So
Yep.
300, 301. So this can be a good opportunity to teach your students how to read a scale. Yep, and also that it's very important that they choose a specific spot for where they're measuring from, so that way they get consistent answers. So that's important that they know that. Then what I'm going to do is add 10 grams, so I've got a 10 gram mass, and when I add that to the cup, okay, it has moved a very tiny amount. It is now reading 298, so that's with 10 grams. I'm reading 298 millimeters. I'm going to add another 10 grams, and I'm going to write down the next reading for that as well. So in this case it's 96. And what I'm doing here is I am calibrating my scale. So when I read a number, I can know how many grams I am actually measuring. So yep, that's 294. 291. So that's 288. 285. Okay, and that was 60 grams, and I have run out of 10 gram masses. So if I want to go to a heavier mass, I'm going to have to get some heavier masses rather than 10 gram masses. So I've just done 6 lots of 10, so that's 60 grams. So now I've still got 10 in there, and I'm going to add a 50 gram mass. So now I have 60 grams again, and it's still 285. That's great. Now I add another one, 282. And Gracie, you're starting to get a sore arm?
Yes.
I can swap over now, so I'll be the one that holds it, and then we can add another weight. And then as we add weights, this just keeps going down. Then, once I've actually used this and I've created my calibration system, I can then use that to weigh objects that you might find around the classroom. So I'm going to pour out the weights, and let's try measuring a battery. Let's see how much it weighs. So on my scale, it says 294. So now that I know that the battery measures 294 millimeters on my force measurer, how can I figure out its mass? Well, what I can do is I can just have a look at the table that I collected before. And if I do that, I can see that the battery would have a mass of 30 grams. But how do I measure the mass of the battery if it didn't match exactly one of the positions I measured before? For example, what if it measured 295 millimeters? Then how do I figure out how much it weighs? Well, I know it's somewhere between 20 and 30, so I could just split the difference and say 25, or I could use a little bit of maths. I could create a plot, a graph like this, where I plot the paper clip position against the mass. I've done it on computer, but your students could do it on paper and practice their plotting skills. Let's zoom in and have a look at this plot then. Then the next step that I would need to do is draw a trend line. This is where I draw a line that matches the points as closely as possible. This is the trend line I could draw here. Your students could use a ruler on their paper. Then what I do is I look at the value for 295. When I read across, I then read down, and I get that this is actually about 22 grams. So this is slightly more accurate than guessing the 25 grams. So that is how you make and use a force measurer. We hope you have a lot of fun using the force measurer in your lessons. Bye!
Bye.